one fact of life is that we're not going to get out of here alive, right? So the question is, what's going to happen to your house and your estate once you die? That's exactly what I'm talking about today. Stick around. Hi, welcome back. My name's Joe Brown, and I'm a realtor with Century 21 List with Beggins located in South Tampa. Thank you so much for being here with me today. So as I said at the beginning, I heard a friend of mine once say, Joe, none of us are getting out of this life alive, right? We're going to die at some point. And I responded by saying, it would make planning so much easier if I knew when I was going to die. And on one hand, I really don't want to know that. But it would make planning a lot easier. So, and this topic really came to mind because recently I'm working with a couple who are very interested in making an offer on this house. Well, what happened is the owner of the house died. And so his heirs decided, we're going to sell the house. So the house is on the market. They want to put a offer in on the house. But you know what? The heirs did not have a right to sell the house. So, yes, they could have been heirs in the will, but it still has to go through the court process, has to go through probate. So let's just back up and talk about this. But that was the nexus for this topic. What's going to happen to your house when you die? What's going to happen to my house when I die? So, and I found this astounding. Back in 2021, so we're talking a year and a half ago, right? In Hillsborough County, 32% of the people died without a will or without a trust. 32%. That means 10,000 people died with no plans after their death. So here's what it looks like, right? So if somebody dies and there's no will, well, what happens to their property? Whether it's a car, their accounts, or their house? Well, it has to go through the court system. And the court will appoint somebody to be the estate, that's what it's called, the estate representative. And they have to go through and figure out all the assets. Well, what's the estate worth? And then they have to figure out who's going to inherit this estate. So, for example, let's say a man who's married and had a couple kids, divorced that wife now has a new wife for whatever reason, and dies without a will. So the new wife may think, I get the estate, but without a will, it goes to the court, and that court representative may decide, no, it's the children from that first marriage get the estate. And that may not be what the gentleman had planned, but he didn't drop a will, so it's no longer his intention, right? It's the intention of the court representative. So, and that process can take several months, or depending on the size of the estate, it could take a couple years to go through the court system and rectify everything. So it is a lengthy process. It's expensive because that court representative doesn't do it for free. They are getting paid out of the estate. So That's one consideration, somebody dying without a will. A second option is you do create a will, right? And so I've mentioned before, I have two daughters, they're grown. And so I could very well say, when I die, well, first of all, my wife is the beneficiary. But if I survive her and I die, then I want my children to inherit everything. And you think that's it. Well, that isn't it, right? Just having a will, you still have to go through the court system, and it may not be as lengthy because the court will say, okay, you're the representative. We need to put notice in the paper of your death, and maybe you've seen this in the paper. It'll ask for all creditors to step forward. If Joe Brown owes you money, step forward and claim the money. And then, it could still take 3-4 months to get the will through court. And then the court may very well say, yes, your daughters are the legal heirs, so yes, they have the right to sell the house. They cannot sell the house until the court says they can sell the house. Now, the third option is called a trust. And we happen to have a trust. My wife and I have a trust. The house is not in my name. The house is in the name of the trust. And so what happens when Joe Brown dies, well, it doesn't matter because the house isn't in my name. The house is in the name of the trust. And the trust is still in effect. And so my wife manages the trust. And when she dies, my children manage the trust. That's all spelled out in the trust documents. And at any point, now, as long as I'm living, they can't. But if both my wife and I die, then my daughters can say, okay, we're going to sell the house. And they are legally entitled to sell the house because the house is in the name of the trust and they're the executors of the trust. Having a trust means you do not have to go through the court system and the probate system. Now, yes, it could take a couple $1,000s to set up the trust, depending on the complexity of the trust and so forth, but it could take a couple $1,000, $2,000-$3,000. But you could very well pay more than that going through the probate system with or without a will. Now, let's talk about the trust a little bit more. So within the trust, not only do I spell out issues of the trust, matters of the trust, but I also include my will, how I want things divided. But there's also something called a health surrogate. And I did not know this until I went through the trust process, and this is good information. So if I get sick and incapacitated to where I cannot make decisions about my health for myself, my wife has the legal right to make those decisions. And I'll tell you, sometimes that's scary, right? No, my wife has the right to make those decisions for me. However, let's say I die and my wife survives, or the other way, my wife dies, I survive, and then I become incapacitated to where I can't make health decisions. My children do not have the right to make those health decisions for me unless I appoint them as health surrogate. And that health surrogate is in my trust. So if my wife and I become incapacitated, then my children have the legal right to make health decisions for us. That is also why I'm very kind to my daughters at all times, right? So, but that's something people don't think about, oh, if I get sick, my kids can decide for me. Oh, no, they can't unless you legally declare that they can. And that's a health surrogate. So listen, we are going to die. Going back to the numbers from 2021, 32% of the people died without a will or a trust. Well, why did people not do a will or a trust? Sometimes they just don't think about it, right? As I said at the beginning, if I knew when I was going to die, it would make decisions a whole lot easier. We don't know when we're going to die. And people die by accident every day, right? So it's that pre-planning, right? That thought of, I need to protect my estate. I need to protect the family if something were to happen. Now, ideally, we live in a world I'm going to live to an old age and I'll take care of all this. But that always doesn't happen either, right? So 32% of the people didn't do it. Another reason is they're concerned about the cost. Oh, I can't afford to do that now. Well, it's either you can't afford to do it now or you're going to pay more later, right? So if there's a way to financially, and even if you have to do it in bits now to secure your estate, then do that, right? And here's another thing. People say, oh, I'll just go on LegalZoom or download trust forms. I'd be very cautious of that, just because those forms are very generic, may not be suited to Florida. At the very least, if you do that, please at least have a family estate lawyer review those. Now, we had a family law estate lawyer prepare our documents. And that's really the best way to go because he can customize. He did customize for us. So listen, this whole point is protecting your investment. Your home could be the single biggest asset in your estate. You need to protect that. You need to be able to control what happens to your estate once you die. So be prepared, think forward. Listen, I am not going to recommend any lawyers. I know who I used, but go Google. You can go on the Florida Bar Association and look for estate lawyers, estate planning law. Look for Google reviews. Talk to a couple different, see what they offer, see what their prices are. Somebody, you want to find somebody you're comfortable with, okay? So that's my advice. Set yourself up. At the very least, draw up a will. The best thing you can do is create a trust. The worst thing you can do is not think about it, not do it, and die with things undone. So anyway, I appreciate you sticking this video out. If you have comments, please leave them below. Shoot me a comment. Remember to go to my website, joebrownc21.com. Search for home, read my blogs, contact me, whatever. Thank you so much for being here. Bye-bye.